Out of 20 G20 leaders, 19 are fraud-endorsing bankster slaves. Last weekend's G20 meeting of so-called world leaders are very revealing because 19 out of 20 of them publicly endorsed the fraud-based global warming scam known as the Paris Accords. This happened despite the fact carbon-based global warming is being proved both legally and scientifically to be a fraud. Michael Mann, the author of the global warming hockey stick graph that is used to be the UN-endorsed IPCC, is facing a jail sentence after refusing a judge's request to show how he got the data to back his claims the world is rapidly warming. Meanwhile, another scientific study showed that almost all the warming recorded in recent years is the result of the temperature data being raised after it was measured. By ignoring facts and pushing the Russia-backed global warming fraud, both Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin proved they were Russia's lackeys. The only leader who has publicly renounced the global warming fraud is US President Donald Trump, and that is why Khazarian mafia-controlled media portray him as isolated. However, things are changing at a deeper level, according to CIA, Pentagon, and other sources. The military and intelligence apparatuses of Russia, the United States, and China are all cooperating despite any hostile posturing by these countries' respective politicians, the sources say. This may be why Pope Francis felt the need to call up a journalist last week to issue the following statement. I am afraid there are very dangerous alliances between powers who have a distorted view of the world, America and Russia, China and North Korea, Russia and Assad in the war in Syria. Remember, it was Pope Francis who handed Trump a 260-page document endorsing the climate change fraud when they met in May. The other thing to note is that the G20 is calling for world governance centered in the IMF. Please recall that the head of the IMF is not selected by the people of the planet, but rather by the same Khazarian bloodline group that selects the head of the UN, the World Bank, etc. Remember, the IMF and its backers have been erecting gates to Temple of the Bow, otherwise known as Satan, at their meetings. Note that the very dangerous alliance the Pope is referring to includes Russia, China, the US, North Korea, and Syria. These countries are all moving away from bloodline control, even though Russia still has a Russia figurehead president. Actual Russian sources this writer has contacted, though, all agree it is the Russian Orthodox Church and not Putin that runs Russia. Pope Francis, it probably means well, but he is deluded if he thinks a P2 Freemason selected person like Marco Di Mauro is going to be anointed the leader of a bloodline-controlled world government. In any case, Francis is being roiled by yet another Vatican scandal. In this case, a drug-fueled gay orgy that was busted by the police after neighbors complained about the noise. This could lead to yet another cardinal being fired. CIA sources say. The Pope should be concentrating more of his efforts on fighting the very real threat of Satanists who were, until recently, on the brink of taking over the world. Yet another former Satanist has come forward with testimony about large-scale human sacrifice and other atrocities carried out by these people. Action is, of course, being taken. The latest was Germany's announcement last week that it broke up a pedophile ring that involved 87,000 people. You can be sure many of the people doing child sacrifices were screwed up at that burst. In the US as well, the final cleanup of the Khazarians continues. In the latest, former President Barack Obama's Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, has been giving detailed testimony about the crimes of her former Clinton-Bush bosses. CIA and other sources say. As a result, Barack Obama sought political asylum in Indonesia last week but was denied it, according to White Dragon Society sources in Indonesia. CIA sources in Europe confirmed this and say Obama is going to have to go back to the US in order to be debriefed on who really controlled his presidency. Recall that when Obama was first elected, he kept saying, "Thank you, Satan," in reverse speech. Pentagon sources say the change in chemistry reflects a Trump regime campaign to seduce Russia into joining it in an alliance against Chinese and Khazarian control. In a smackdown of the cabal and the deep state, political novice Trump was honored to meet with the elder statesman Putin, where Putin's plan to make Russia great again with symphony of church and state will no doubt to be the blueprint for Trump to make America great again. The Pentagon sources say. Trump emerges as defender of Western civilization from Judaic Zionist destruction, and he is ably assisted by Putin and the Pope to form a super Christian bloc to contain China and Holocaust the global Jewish mafia, one Pentagon source says. The WDS makes it clear there is to be no collective punishment, and the only people who are being targeted are the ones who have been engaged in mass murder through biological weapons, nuclear terror, human sacrifice, illegal war, etc. However, it is clear that the Trump administration represents a generalized backlash against Khazarian control that could spiral out of control into an attack on Jews in general. On his trip to Poland, Trump refused to visit the Jewish Warsaw Shadow Monument. In his speech in Poland, when Trump mentioned threats from inside and from the south and the east, he was referring to Saudi Arabia, Israel, and its fifth column in the U.S., the Pentagon sources say. Also, the neocons H.R. McMaster and Jared Kushner were blocked from attending the meeting between Trump and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson with their counterparts Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. At the meeting, the U.S. pushed for a restoration of U.S.-Russian ties to counter China, according to the Pentagon. The Americans also proposed a Russian-U.S. cybersecurity unit aimed to prevent Israeli and Chinese hacking, e-hijacking, and other cyber attacks, the sources say. Russian sources, for their part, continue to say they are wary of the sudden U.S. friendliness because of the long history of U.S. aggression against Russia. The Russians say they are against forming opposing blocs and prefer a world where everybody is friendly. Nonetheless, recent Chinese aggressive moves against India clearly seems to have backfired against China. Russia is very concerned about Chinese aggression in the South China Sea and the Indian subcontinent, which is why the Vietnamese Prime Minister was invited to the G20, the Pentagon sources say. The U.S. Navy, for its part, sent a message by conducting joint naval exercises with Japan and India recently. The Chinese now appear to have backed off following a meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and India Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the sidelines of the G20. Another interesting thing to note about the G20 is that Saudi King Salman and warrior Prince Mohammed bin Salman were declared persona non grata at the G20 for being a proxy for Israel. The Pentagon sources say. They say Qatar is on the winning side in its dispute with Saudi Arabia and that disposed Crown Prince Nayef may still be reinstated. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, for his part, was offering bribes in exchange for protection at the G20, according to Japanese right-wing sources close to the emperor. Abe's party suffered a crushing defeat at recent Tokyo municipal elections and is likely to be forced to hold elections this year, where it will be rooted from national politics, the sources say. What is undeniable is that there is a major split at the top of the Japanese power structure. This is reflected in opinion polls in Japan's newspaper, where the right-wing national Sankei newspaper shows support for Abe at 86%. While the left-leaning Asahi newspaper shows his support at 14%. The centrist regional Tokyo Shinbun newspaper shows his support at only 5%. The following link is in Japanese, but the percentage signs show the incredible gaps in newspaper opinion polls. Japanese right-wing sources say the nationalist Tanaka faction is gearing up for a regime change in Japan and that this will result in the removal of Korean proxies who have been subcontracting the rule of the Japan for the Khazarians since the end of the World War II. The fact that Abe was setting up a massive chemical and biological warfare research center disguised as the Keigakuen Veterinary College has exposed him and his regime as genocidal war criminals. Several right-wing sources have called to inform this writer that Abe was not expected to live more than 3 months. Meanwhile, as the warmongers are removed from power around the world, signs of a construction boom are emerging. WDS sources in Indonesia say the Indonesian government is planning to build a new capital to replace the overcrowded and sinking city of Jakarta. The Japanese underworld, for its part, is looking forward to a bonanza as the Chinese government prepares to move many capital functions to a new city 150 kilometers from Beijing. A Japanese underworld boss says Japanese companies are getting lucrative contracts for their waste disposal and other environmental work on the new capital because the Chinese want Japan's know-how on how to create clean megacities. Shit happens and somebody's got to clean it up. Once Khazarian rule ends in Japan, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Ukraine, the world will be ready to enter a new golden age.